And there's Josh Miller with you, and our guests this evening, Beverly and Michael Solitinu of WestGroupe. Beverly, Michael, welcome to CJAD.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming in. So the first question of the night is the easiest, of course. What do you do for a living? Tell me about WestGroupe.
Well, WestGroupe, we're in the eyeglass wholesale business. We design, create, manufacture, and sell to all the independent eyewear providers.
And you, now, the company's been around how long?
55 years.
55 years. Now, you haven't been there that long, you know. There's no video, but you haven't been there that long.
No, our father started the business in 1961. He had a partner. After a year, he bought the partner out, and he started bringing in frames from the U.S. And then in 1967, he went over to France and he started importing frames from France. And he started going door to door. He would go out selling during the day, and at night he'd go back to the office, and he was one or two people, and he'd pack up the orders and ship them out. And every day he'd do that. And then eventually he built a staff. And Bev and I came into the business. I came into the business in 1990, and Bev came in 94.
Now, you don't sell to the public, right? You don't retailers. You're wholesale. You sell to the retailers.
That's correct. We sell primarily to independent opticians and optometrists across Canada and U.S. and Europe, Australia. We're in about 40 countries now.
Now, so your dad had his business for, call it, almost 30 years, or before you guys kind of got into the picture. What was that transition like? I mean, what was that, was it easy for him to take the foot off the gas pedal? Did you welcome in? Where did you start in the business? I don't know if Mike, I think you came in first and then Bev after, if I understand correctly. So what was that kind of first stage?
I think the transition that we had, my dad was very clear. He wanted me to learn the business from the bottom. So, we had a full service laboratory. So I was working in the lab. I was grinding lenses. Then I went on the road selling, and I was selling. I had a territory in Northern Ontario, which my first customer was a 9-hour drive. And I started with the bags, and I kept the bags up until I think last year. I finally gave up my territory. And it's just so important to learn the business from the bottom up. To start in the middle or to start at the top, you just can't learn it, and you can't succeed if you don't know the business inside and out.
And Beverly, when did you enter the picture, and what was your kind of first roles?
I started in the business in 94. I graduated with an MBA from Queen's in marketing and international business. And I started the same way. When I joined the company, I worked in a couple of marketing positions at outside companies before I joined WestGroupe, because I wanted to bring something from the outside in. My dad had been, he had his business for 30 years and had done things the same way for 30 years. And for me, it was important to bring something new and sort of augment what he's been doing. But I also started in sales. I was living in Toronto. I had a full territory. I worked in sales full-time for 10 years and slowly got more involved in the product development side of our business. I'm now responsible for all the product design, concept, and marketing of our company. But same as Mike said, unless you really understand the industry and your customer, you can't manage from an ivory tower.
Did your dad have a different kind of management style than the two of you? Did that change drastically once you guys kind of came into the management side of things?
Well, as any entrepreneur that started the business from zero, he was rolling up his sleeves and he was doing everything. Even when he had a staff of 10 or 12 people, if he went into the shipping area and he saw the boxes lined up and it was backlogged, he would roll up his sleeves and he would help pack. End of story, right? Where I look at it a different way. If I go in the back and I see there's a backlog of product, and I have no problem rolling up my sleeves and packing, but my first question would be, why is there a backlog? How do we fix it that you don't need my help? Because I'm not always there to help. So I think there's certainly a different style in management. When we had probably 10 years ago, we had a 7-year succession plan. And this plan was a slow transition from my dad running the company to Bev and I running the company. And we took our time and we had very strategic plans. And, at the time we had low management. It was my dad, myself, Bev, and that was it. And when we decided that we were going to move the business into our hands, the first thing that we said was we need more managers. We need to supervise this company a little bit differently, and we need to create a place where we could allow people to grow and we could have a wonderful culture to have people come alive and build the business up.
Our guests this evening, Beverly and Michael Solatinu of West Group, and we're talking about a bit of the history of West Group, the succession plan, the transition plan, and now Beverly and Michael are running the show, Josh.
And it was very interesting. Just before the break, Mike said something pretty quickly. He said there was a 7-year succession plan. And I got to tell you, of all the many guests that we've had on the show, Dan, you don't always hear of a formalized succession plan, as Mike was alluding to. So I kind of want to elaborate and hear a little bit more about that. This 7-year plan, was this initiated by your dad? Was it the three of you? How did this kind of come about? And I'm pretty sure you're past it by now. So how smoothly did it go, and how many changes or bumps were there along the way?
I think the most important thing was that, even when we started it, I started in 90 and Bev in 94, it was always about being open and being honest. And in 2003, 2004, we started talking about moving the business over to us. And it was really a group effort. My dad wanted to slow down. He wanted to spend more time in Florida during the winter time. And we kept saying, no problem. But if you want to slow down and you want to leave for a month or 2 months or 3 months, your responsibilities have to be moved. Mm-hmm. And if that's just the normal way. Now, he didn't want to quickly move out, but a 7-year plan was we felt very comfortable. It was a very slow process. I would take over the sales, and Bev would slowly take over all the inventory and all the buying and all the different commitments, and it just happened very smoothly. And of course, we started adding managers. And just getting used to the managers. Whenever you create a position, it comes off the bottom line right off the hop. Mm-hmm. So as soon as those managers start paying back or start paying for themselves, we could move to the next step.
Now, was your dad, forgive the term, was he a control freak? Was it easy to let it go of the reins?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the reason why the plan worked is that it was something that we all wanted. He never felt that he was being pushed out. We never felt that we had to do things a certain way, his way, and we just couldn't wait for him to leave so we can do things our way. It was never like that. And in that respect, we're very lucky. And that's why I think the transition was so smooth.
And when you guys were in the business and you're bringing ideas, whether it's new managers so that people do it, or perhaps new marketing or administration, the ideas were welcome. The ideas, you were fairly transparent. It sounds like that worked pretty well. Was there ever a point where there was any butting heads, or it was pretty smooth?
No, I could honestly say, when we first started hiring managers, I remember our operations manager, Carol Cote. We hired her. We created this position, and originally he didn't want to create this position. He says, we don't need this. We could do it ourselves. I knew if we would start to grow, we needed systems in place, and we need someone firm to hold the systems in place. And we went on a buying trip, and I was pushing my dad for probably a good 10 to 15 months that we need an operations manager. And he kept saying, no, it's not the time. It's not the time. And then there was one time all three of us went on a buying trip. We come back 2.5 weeks later, and there's lineups out the door, all with systems issues of all the people that are working there. And that's when he said, that's it. Go get your operations manager.
So does that mean it was very informal before, and you created a lot more processes and systems when you came in?
Yes.
Did you find that was absolutely essential to go to the next level of your business?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
What specifically did you add that was probably the biggest change, or resulted in the biggest change to your business?
Again,
from a process standpoint,
having an operations manager,
that layer you're saying,
that layer, and then having a sales manager, a national sales manager, and then having regional managers. But I think it's one thing to have managers, but it's another thing to empower people to feel part of the business and really feel the success of of the business is based on what they do and what they bring to the business.
And as we've heard so many times, the team, the human resource, the team around you really makes a huge difference. So when we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit more about your team and kind of how you find them and how you work together, and we'll go from there.
7:34 on today's Entrepreneur. Welcome back. This is a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller, and our guest this evening, Beverly and Michael Solatinu of West Group. And let's move on to HR, Josh. And well, guys, why don't we just start by talking about some of your employees? How many are there? How big is West Group?
We have 110 full-time employees, and then we have in the U.S. we probably have another 20 independent agents. Sales agents.
Now, you've grown over the years.
Yes.
You weren't always 110.
No.
I'm sure that's how. Are you happy with your current culture, and how do you maintain it?
The culture, first of all, we're absolutely thrilled with our culture, and that is a very key feature in everything we do at West Group. It's about who you are, accountability. It's about being part of something and being proud of something. And we absolutely work every day for keeping those values of our company culture. It is a very key piece of ingredients in helping us grow.
I think also, even though we've grown and we've added layers, we've only added one layer, which I think is really key. We don't have a bunch of different managerial positions. We have us, then our one level of key management, and then all the other employees. So there's not a big path to get from the customer service rep to Mike and I. And we're all accessible, and no one closes their door, and it's very easy for any of them to come speak to any of us.
Is it too easy? Maybe do you find yourself?
No,
never. It's I think people want a sense of accomplishment. They want to feel part of something, and they want to feel that they count. And it's so important for people to feel like they belong, and the feeling that we get walking around the office, people are smiling, people are enjoying their job. It's just, we feel we're very proud of what we've done in terms of people.
Do you do anything different or unique? Like, how do you ensure that this culture stays? Like, do you have whether it's family days or you have more social gatherings, or is there anything you do to maintain this? Like, is there a secret?
No, we do family days, we do sugar shack days, and we do we do all of that. But again, it's the type of person we look when we hire them. When we hire people, most of the managers that we've hired, it's on gut, on a relationship, on looking someone in the eye, shaking their hands, and I could see right into who they are.
So would you say you hire more on character and fit than you do on skill set?
Yes.
Take your time, really think about it.
No, I could tell you a quick story. When we hired our national sales manager, who is now our VP of sales, I looked at him in 1994, or 95, at a local Ontario show of optometrists, and he was a salesperson for somebody else. And I looked at him and I said, "When are you going to come to a real company?" Okay, and he looked at me, shook his. "I love what you and your sister are doing. When you call me, I will come."
And he was working for one of the largest international optical companies. So for us, it was based on, I think, the fact that we're so accessible. When you were asking, like, how do you keep that culture? And I think the fact that myself and my dad are all very accessible, that I think that maintains the culture. I think as soon as you lose that and you have a corporate attitude, your company becomes corporate.
11 years later, I called him and I said, "I'm calling." And he remembered the conversation. And then in 2005, I said, "I'm calling." And he says, "Okay, what position? What territory?" And I said, "Canada." He goes, "Okay, what section do you want me to sell in?" I go, "Canada. I need a national sales manager." And he looked at me, he says, "But I'm a salesperson." I said, "No, you're going to be my national sales manager." And he says, I've never done it before. I said, "You could do it."
And there you go. So now you're in international sales. I mean, this company that started in '61, you're making frames for retailers. You're the generic brands. Like, at what point do you create your own?
I think for us, we had built our business creating our own house brands, which were more generic brands, and also distributing for other companies, so being the Canadian distributor. And it came to a point where we realized that distributing other people's collections, we didn't have control over our business, and we were at the whim of whatever decision someone else made. So we knew the Canadian market better than any American or European company that was selling in Canada. So we decided to, and we were always successful with our own sort of house brands. And we decided to take it to the next level and create eyewear brands that would rival any international brand. And we put a lot of money behind it to market those brands, to create eyewear brands.
Now, there's a lot of people that talk about, I'm going to create a brand. Now, that's I'm going to create a brand. That small sentence really means a whole lot more than that. What is the first big step that you have to take right after you say, I want to create a brand?
You have to have a vision of what that brand is all about, who your target market is, what you want the product to look like, and what you want it to stand for, and be clear that there is a market for what you are developing.
So did you do it right when you created your brand?
We did. The first time, absolutely.
And I think you also have to have staying power, because it takes time. Everything takes time, and you have to be willing to understand you need to spend the money, and you need to continue to spend the money, and you need to continue to spend the money to create that brand. And you need to just keep pushing forward.
And I think also because I was on the road, I was the sales rep for so long, I was in the stores. So I saw where the hole was, and we created a brand to fill that hole. If I wasn't in sales and we had been sitting around in the office, okay, let's create an eyewear brand, I don't know if we would have been as successful as we were.
Do you get a lot of input from your customers? Do you solicit their input, or is this all from your own knowledge and experience in the industry?
I think it's both. For me, even when I moved back to Montreal and went full-time into product development, I still kept 6 accounts that I go down in Toronto and I still service. And I think it's very important in order to see what the competition is doing, but also hear the feedback on our product offering and what's working and what's not, and how do we become better, because they're the people that are selling our product. They're the ones that are getting the consumer reaction. If I'm not going to listen to them, then our product is not going to be as successful as I want it to be.
A slightly different question, although focusing around the same thing. Trade shows. We've often heard, on the show, on the program, different entrepreneurs, their different take on trade shows. What do trade shows mean for you? Do they work for you? Do you feel they're beneficial? What's the pluses and minuses of a trade show for you?
Perception. You have to build a perception. If you're growing your business, you need to be in the industry, and you need to show people who you are, and you need to demonstrate that you're real. So trade shows, we attend 6 international trade shows. We exhibit in all of them, and we exhibit very large booths for perception. Yes, I like to write business at these shows, and we do write some business, but the perception is probably more important than the business that I write at these shows.
Trade shows today, are they different than the trade shows you did 10 years ago or 15 years ago?
I think so. I think over the years, trade shows used to be a selling show. And people used to write a lot of business. Now I think it's more networking. It's going around and seeing all the products that you may not deal with, but it gives you a chance to see what else is out there, perhaps for future decision making.
And you're doing trade shows. You mentioned earlier on the program that you do sell internationally. It's not just Canada, it's not just North America, but really in various parts of the world. So I would imagine trade shows are also in various parts of the world. What would be the biggest lesson or takeaway that you've had over the last 10, 15 years in selling internationally? What's worked best for you, or what hasn't?
I think the most important thing when you go international, we started very slowly. In 2004, we went to our first show in Paris. Then we went to Milan, and we've only learned recently that if you're going to go into these markets, you need to hire the people that are familiar with these markets. You know, we just came back from Milan, and we just hired a new export manager to take care of all our business outside of North America. He's based in Italy, and we had one of our best shows ever in Europe last week in Milan.
Because you had a local touch.
That's right.
Yes.
Excellent. I think the international business, and there's so much more that we could talk about, but we're coming up to our next break, but we're still going to stay on the international, at least selling to the U.S., Dan.
Yes, Ernie Furt's going to join us, tax partner at Fuller Landau, and he'll navigate some tax questions if you are selling to the U.S. That's coming up on today's Entrepreneur 745. Inspiring stories from outstanding business people, Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you on today's Entrepreneur, and our guests this evening, Beverly and Michael Solatino of West Group, and we'll bring in Ernie Furt as well, tax partner at Fuller Landau, to talk about some of the tax challenges selling to the U.S., and there are many, it seems.
And there's no doubt that we won't be able to cover everything in the next, call it 10 minutes. But let's start with some of the highlights, Ernie. You have a Canadian company. They have customers in the U.S., let's say they even have a subsidiary or a company in the U.S. What are some of the first things that they need to think about and make sure that they're doing properly?
They just have to make sure that they have good representation in the States, sell their product, and understand that there may be some filing requirements in some of the states and some of the jurisdictions. Because you can sell from Canada directly to the States, or alternatively, you can have your sub down there, and it can do that. But you have to ensure that when you're in a certain state, you check out the rules with respect to that state with your accountant or with your accountant's affiliate, whatever it may be, so you know that you don't get a big surprise at the end by getting a big questionnaire from the state of Georgia or whatever it may be to saying, well, you had 4 sales in Georgia, you have to file a Georgia state tax return. And that happens frequently.
Now there's this word that gets thrown around a lot. A lot of people just traveling to the States see it and businesses see it. There's this word called nexus. What exactly does nexus mean, and kind of why should entrepreneurs be very aware of this?
Nexus means it's a connection with the particular state. So if you have a connection with the state, chances are you have to file some type of documentation with the state. And when I do a lot of business with Canadians and Americans, so the Americans think one thing when they come into Canada, that if they have a salesperson in Canada, they have to file a return immediately. Canadians, on the other hand, we're more familiar with a term called permanent establishment, which is effectively bricks and mortar, or alternatively, somebody who has the authority to contract on behalf of the business. And so when we go down to the States, we seem to go down to the States, with the I don't care kind of attitude, where we just, oh yeah, we've been selling into 27 states and it's like not a problem. We filed nothing in the States. Well, that's a problem.
No question. I mean, I can turn to Mike and Bev. I mean, you guys sell to the States. What has been your experience? Is it a compliance nightmare?
No, because when we opened up our U.S. Company, we went to our accountants and we said, "What do we have to do?" And they said, "The first and foremost is set up a proper transfer price book or documentation to make sure the Canadian government is happy, the U.S. government is happy between the two businesses, and of course, if we have to file, we file, and we file, I think, in 26 different states, and that was from minute one."
And there's no question that all governments are pretty much broke these days, so everybody wants their piece of the pie.
Absolutely.
Is there something, Ernie? Mike mentioned transfer pricing. Just a quick commentary. What exactly is it, and kind of documentation that businesses should think about?
Businesses should take a look at what the Canadian government wants is they want you to sell your stuff and they want to keep your profit in Canada. The U.S. government wants the opposite. They want you to sell your stuff in the States and they want you to keep your profit in the States. So somewhere in between there is what the proper transfer price is. So the transfer price you're going to sell down there, so you make a profit in Canada, and the Canadian and the U.S. arm also makes a profit. So everybody's happy at the end of the day. And that's the simplistic view of transfer pricing.
Now, what happens if you're a Canadian company and you sell to the States, but you don't have Nexus, or you just have a showroom that you have? Are you caught into a lot of these rules, or not really?
You can be caught into some of the rules, but you generally have to file a protective type of a U.S. return which is a treaty-based U.S. return. And that treaty-based U.S. return just basically says, hello, U.S. government, I am selling into the States, but I don't have any nexus in any of the States. As such, I'm just telling you I'm selling into the States, but I'm not going to be taxable because I have no fixed place of business in the States, because that's based on the treaty. Now, the States work a little differently. You could have no federal nexus or permanent establishment, but the state may think you have a nexus and may consider you to have nexus if you're actually traveling through the state. Like in the state of New Jersey, if you travel through with your own trucks, they will consider you to have nexus. In the state of Pennsylvania, they'll also consider you to have nexus if you have an independent sales rep who is doing business on your behalf. There's all kinds of very particular rules, and you really need an expert in each of these jurisdictions to get the real answer.
7:55 on today's Entrepreneur. Beverly and Michael Solatinu of West Group are here, and Ernie Furt as well, tax partner at Furlow Landau, talking about selling to the U.S. and the tax challenges that come with it.
And what we're really talking about is there are many forms to complete. But really, before you even get there, you got to ask the right questions. You got to kind of plan it properly. I believe Mike and Bev, we were talking off air, and you were very, very, very direct in saying, you know what, we just got to do it right. Doesn't matter what it is, we just got to do it right, and this is our business, and this is how we go. Ernie, are there maybe some questions that entrepreneurs need to, simple ones that they got to ask themselves to determine, hey, do I got to start complying with certain federal, state, county, backwards?
If you're selling into a foreign jurisdiction, whether it's the States or elsewhere, you got to start talking to people in that jurisdiction. And first you start with your accountant. Yeah, you ask him or her, is there any special things that I need to know before I enter into this into these sales into the States or elsewhere, before I go to this trade show? Do I have to file anything? Do I need any special papers if I go to sell stuff in the States? It's great to know all this stuff at the beginning so you know the rules of the game, and then you can play the game properly, and you can sleep at night. You file all your requisite papers. You don't get a bunch of crazy penalty notices and stuff that just will make you crawl, because these notices can come out of nowhere, and you won't know what hit you, and all of a sudden your profit margin will be gone. So make sure you do the proper compliance, factor it all in, talk to the right people, start from the beginning. Don't come to your accountant and say, well, I have these letters that I haven't responded to. What do you think I should do with them?
And not to get into the dollar amount of penalties, but it's one thing, you might save a whole hell of a lot of money by actually filing the forms, even if you don't owe any tax, versus the potential penalties that the IRS might invoke.
The IRS can invoke large penalties for failure to file certain forms. There's $10,000 penalties for failure to file certain forms for transactions between parents and parent corporations and their subsidiaries, and vice versa. So it's always important to look at the filing requirements, because the IRS makes a lot of money on penalties. So you want to stay away from the penalties, and it's very difficult to get those penalties abated. You have to be in the right situation, and you may be able to get them abated.
And federal, state, city, county, you gotta, there's so many layers, right?
There is tons of layers. In New York State alone, I think I must have mentioned this once or twice on this show, I think there's more than 50 taxing jurisdictions, and there's different rates for different things. So big retail stores really, really have to deal with that diligently.
An absolute minefield. Thanks very much, Ernie. So as we approach our last moments of the show, we'll turn to Beverly and Mike and ask them, what would be your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
I think for me, know your market and really surround yourself with good people. And if you're going outside of your market, make sure that you have people in that market who know the landmines and land field and really have a good understanding of the area that you're doing business in.
Excellent. Mike?
I think for me, it's about slow and steady. I think it's about taking your time. Don't be in a rush. Our business, it's 55 years old, and we're still learning, and we're still growing. But we're growing slowly but steadily.
And thank you very much. And Dan, we've heard we always hear from many entrepreneurs, and I guess the takeaway that I get from Mike and Beverly, and there's probably many, so I'll have to sift through it, but It's really, Mike said, go with your gut and know what you're doing. I think it's being a little methodical, and yes, you can go with your gut, but you know what? Plan it out, look ahead, measure it, adjust it, move on. I think being methodical, certainly as your business is growing, so you don't waste a whole bunch of dollars and resources. I think that's key, and I think to attribute to the success of the West Group.
Thanks, Josh, and thanks to Beverly and Michael of West Group for dropping by this evening. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And Ernie Furk, tax partner at Fuller Landau. Thank you as well, sir. And we are back next Monday night. 2 weeks from now on Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800. The Exchange with Richard Eufy is next. It's 8 o'clock.